Who knows what evil lurks in the heart of game? The Shadow knows. Hi, I'm the Shadow Knows, and I'm back with another of Commodore's greatest failures. Yes, this is probably going to be a little more controversial, but it's the Commodore 128, and yeah, this is just the keyboard from the 128D, and the D does not stand for diesel, but for a desktop version with a built-in disk drive. It lives down there. You probably can't see it, but I'm too lazy to pull it out. It's yeah, just a box, and it initially was a keyboard model like the Commodore C64, and they modeled the later Commodore C64C models, or Commodore 64-2, I think it was unofficially named here in Germany. Yeah, and basically this in a case with the computer built in, and it yellowed quite significantly. That's the color it's supposed to be. On this side you basically have the usual Commodore 64 keyboard with the locking shift lock key, and you have a number pad. The F keys went up here. You have real cursor keys, and they also work in Commodore 64 mode, I think, along with those cursor keys. Yeah, an escape key, a tab, an alt, and alt is... I would like to have a tab of alt. Here you can switch between the usual Commodore Petsky character set and a DIN character set, which means you have a German keyboard layout with the fancy German umlauts, and Y and Z swapped and all those things, a help key, line feed, a key for 40 and 80 column mode, and no scrolls, so basically a scroll lock key. And yeah, the original Commodore 128 came with this built in. Yeah, but what is a Commodore 128? It's yeah, basically it's a glorified Commodore 64 with a built-in second computer which has Z80 CPU and can run CPM. So it has three operational modes. The first one is the native 128 mode, where you have a little bit of an advanced basic 7.0, access to 128K memory, hence the name Commodore 128. And in theory, the CPU could run at 2 MHz instead of 1 MHz, which would basically double the speed, but there is a little catch in that, because yeah, the Commodore 128 has two different video chips built in. The first is the VIC-2 chip from the Commodore C64, with a little addition that it can operate at 2 MHz. But yeah, it can operate at 2 MHz, but it cannot display anything at 2 MHz. So basically, if you're running at in the 40 character mode, you're stuck to the same 1 MHz operational speed that you had on the Commodore 64, so the programs won't run any faster. There is a way to switch it to 2 MHz in 40 character mode, which would blank out the display, and it runs at the 2 MHz, basically like the ZX81 in slow mode and fast mode. Yeah, quite great for a 1985 machine. But if you use an 80 character mode, and you need a different monitor for 80 character mode, because in 80 character mode it basically outputs a CGA signal. Yeah, but in 80 character mode it will run at 2 MHz. Yeah, but you don't have the sprites and those things in 2 MHz mode, so yeah, great. second mode is the Commodore C64 mode, and it's 99.9 something % compatible with the Commodore 64 in C64 mode. There are a handful of games that screw up because there are some extra registers in the video chip. So yeah, you can basically use the 128K in C64 mode, I think, and you can definitely use the 2 MHz clock speed, which would disable your video output. But there are some games that actually benefit when running on a Commodore 128 in C64 mode, and they basically wait for the vertical blank interlace, or it's called VBI, when the raster beam has written the picture and returns. So when the video chip is outputting something that you won't see anyways, the program switches to the 2 MHz mode, and it switches back to the 1 MHz mode when the raster beam arrives at the point where you have to write the visible picture. So I think you can gain 30% more speed out of that. So some games actually do show, I think they show a little bit more sprites or have more sound effects or so, but yeah, really nothing to write home about. So in C64 mode, it's basically a C64. It works like a C64. Some games do benefit slightly, but it's only a handful, so really not worth bothering getting a 128 for that. And I think an equal amount of games screw up because they randomly write into a register and trigger some functions that the Commodore C64 doesn't have. So yeah, the third mode is the CPM mode, where the Z80 processor comes into play. Basically you have to put a boot disk into the disk drive, a CPM boot disk, when you turn it on, and then it looks for the disk, and if it finds the disk, it boots into CPM mode, and there's no other way than resetting the machine to turn it back into 128 C128 or Commodore C64 mode. Yeah, sounds great, doesn't it? So why is it a failure? Basically because it's not of much use. The native C128 mode was used a little by application software. So you got yeah, basically word processing, database programs, spreadsheet, which used the 80 character mode and the 128K of memory and the faster disk drive. There were two disk drives developed for the 128. The 1570, which lives down there. It's yeah, basically a 1541 with the controller board of the initially designed for the 128 disk drive, the 1571, which is double-sided, compatible with the 1541 in C64 mode, so you can use all your C64 disk games. Sadly, it's not as compatible as the C128, so yeah, copy protected software sometimes failed, especially copy protected software which was released before the C128. I think later games considered that they might run on a 1571, which was for some reason also bought by some Commodore C64 users, and I don't think you had much benefit on the Commodore 64 when you used 1571, and it was yeah, prices, that's one of the failures. In 1985, when the machine was released, it was 1200 German marks roughly, recommended retail price. It was sold a little cheaper, but not initially, and you could get a C64 for half of that. The disk drive, I have it somewhere here. The 1570 which was a stopgap because they could not ship enough 1571. Basically, the rumors are they could not get enough of the mechanics or the case. The case is basically a 1541-2, much larger with a built-in power supply. Yeah, the 1571 was 950 German marks and the 1570 750. And you needed, for the 80 color mode, you needed a monitor. In Europe it was a 1901, I think in America it was a 1902. 14 inch. It is supposed to have a very nice picture. And it works with both the 80 color mode and the 40 color mode. So you had a switch between CGA and composite video. Sadly, out of the box it did not do analog RGB, so you could not use it with an Amiga. But it was possible to mod a SCART socket into it, so you could also use it on an Amiga, and it is supposed to have a very nice picture. But yeah, 1200 for the 128. A little short of $1,000 for the disk drive, and another $1,000 for the monitor. So you had to pay 3,000 German marks for the 128 in a usable configuration. You could get a C64 for 600 and the disk drive for 650, and use your existing television. So $1,200, $1,250 for a Commodore 64 setup, $1,300 if you got the tape drive, $1,400 if you got something like an final cartridge or an action replay, or speed DOS, which is about as fast as the newer disk drive with the Commodore 128, and that was an improvement. The 1570 and the 1571 did support a burst mode on the serial interface, which sped up the data transfer rate quite significantly. For some strange reason, even faster than the parallel disk drive 1551 for the Commodore 264 series, which only speeded up disk transfer for about 4 times. And I think the burst mode was 6 or 8 times faster than the horribly slow 1541, which also works on the 128, and probably was quite useful if you had copy protected software which you wanted to use in the C64 mode. Yeah, price was really one big downside. A year later, in '86, they released the model with the integrated disk drive. And the first release of that had a nice plastic case. I don't have one of those because they are quite highly sought after and not produced for a very long time. And by the way, the original 128 and the original 128D, the one with the plastic housing, did have the original good SID chip. This is from the 128D CR, which came in a metal case and was also released in the United States. The original 128D was not released in the United States because the FCC didn't make their stamp on it because it had too much RF interference for the American market. Yeah, the 128D was 1,800 German marks, and I have some prices in pounds and dollars. The original 128, $350 to $400, or roughly 270 British pounds. Don't quote me on that. The 128D, 1,800 German marks without the monitor, and yeah, 600 pounds in the UK. In '87, as I already mentioned, they released the 128D CR in the US for $550 without a monitor. And yeah, they basically cancelled the 128 models in 1989. Not because they did not sell very well, but because they were horrendously expensive to manufacture, and they could not cut down production costs like they could on the Commodore 64. So I don't think they sold them on a loss, but they made much more money out of each Commodore 64 that they sold than compared to the 128. Yeah, and why was it a failure? Basically because it was horrendously expensive to manufacture. They sold about 5 million of those, and yeah, it was basically a Commodore C64 and another computer inside. So yeah, you got the SID chip, you got the VIC chip, you got the I think it's a 8502, which is an expanded 6510 from the Commodore 64. It was modded to run on 2 MHz, and it has some extra pins and some extra registered for the enhanced memory mapping in the 128. It had the, what is it called? I have to look it up. 8563 or 8568 VDC video chip, and this was one of the biggest problems of the 128. Very stupid design. It could not tell. Yeah, the VIC chip is mapped directly into the Commodore C64's memory, or 128 memory. So you could just write, the CPU could just write into the memory locations, and the VIC chip displayed what was in that memory location. The VDC was accessible via 2 memory locations, 16-bit address, and the CPU had to write to those 2 locations, and I think a third location which was the control register. And there was no signal that the writing was finished, and they did not run at the same clock rate. Yeah, asynchronous running and not telling and not signaling that the write was finished is not a good idea. There is an interesting story at, I think it's the Secret Weapons of Commodore. I'll try to find it and link it down below in the description, or maybe somehow in the video. Very interesting story to read, and yeah, you had to poll if writing was completed or you got wrong data. Video chip had its own memory, 16K in the original model and I think 64K in the later ones, yes. And it could do quite high resolutions in bitmap mode, which was not supported by the BASIC and was quite rarely used because it was quite awkward to program compared to the VIC chip. So the resolution supported by the operating system is 640 by 200, and I think it can go up on the 64K equipped models up to 700 by 700 in interlaced mode, or 700 by basically roughly half of 700, 350 non-interlaced with when you program the chip directly, which was rarely used. I think you did get some block copy operations from the chip, which you could trigger from I think 1 or 2 control registers to memory transfer registers, so you 4 memory locations in the memory map to communicate with the VDC chip. So I think it did do block copying, it did do some sort of scrolling, but no sprites, and it was quite rarely used in games. Basically, yeah, used in productivity software. Some Infocom adventures did run in 128 mode in the 80 columns mode, which was, yeah, probably quite nice. I only found like 15 or 20 games that will run in 128K mode. Yeah, compare that to the 128K Amstrad or the 128K Spectrum models, which each I think sold, I think they sold less Spectrums and less Amstrads than they sold 128 Commodore, C128 Commodores. But yeah, about 15 or 20 games for the Commodore 128 and a lot more games for each the Spectrum and the Amstrad 128K models, which at least benefited in some way from the memory or the additional sound chip in the Spectrum 128K models. So yeah, that's one reason why I think this was a huge failure. It did get some productivity software, and I think it was quite popular among Commodore's users, which did mailbox and stuff like that. So yeah, maybe not a huge failure for those users, but as a gamer, no benefits at all. Most games are, as the mentioned Infocom Adventures, some RPGs did benefit from the 128, and that's it. I think there were maybe a handful of games that were not text adventures or RPGs. One comes into my mind, it's The Last V8, budget game from Mastertronic, from the Mastertronic Added Dimension series. I think it has an additional level and different but clearer speech samples, and that's it. Same crappy game, just an additional level. Yeah, the CPM mode was also quite flawed because for all I/O operations it used the 8502 CPU from the 128 mode and the I/O chips from the 128 mode, and they all ran on 2 MHz, so basically the Z80 CPU ran on half the clock rate it could run on, and since CPM wasn't the fastest operation system in the world, it ran at half the speed. Didn't get much use. Actually, one of my mates back in the days did use the CPM mode on his 128D, because we used to have computer science lessons in at school, and we used Apple II computers with CPM and Turbo Pascal, and he used his 128D to write his own programs in Turbo Pascal at home, or make his homework on a computer and printed it out instead of writing the programs on paper as we were supposed to do. Yeah, it was quite a bit better. I did the same, but with a MS-DOS PC emulator, software emulator on the Amiga, which was horribly slow. So I think my mate got away a little bit better with this 128, but don't think that much. Yeah, that was a use that I know someone who actually used the CPM mode for this one specific software, but I don't think it got used that much. When this machine was released in 1985, CPM already lost horribly versus IBM PC and MS-DOS, which were on the market for 4 years, and I think there were quite a few clone machines already available, and I think also the AT models were available. Don't ask me about the prices for those early DOS machines. The IBM PC was probably a lot more expensive than the 3,000 German marks, roughly, that Commodore asked for it. And even if it, I think a year later you could get a complete system for 2,500 German marks. The 128 with, yeah, 2,500 I think you had to pay for the monitor. The 128D, yeah, I think 2,500 German marks, and probably you already got IBM PC clone for 2,500 bucks in 1986. Yeah, maybe you had to pay $3,500, but you got better software, more software. It was IBM compatible, that was a standard, that was totally clear in 1986 that you did not want CP/M anymore. You wanted a DOS machine, even though DOS is a shit operating system. It was a standard. Industry standard. CP/M was the standard of the 70s and DOS was the standard of the 80s. So terribly outdated on release. And yeah, failure. So what should Commodore have done with a successor for the Commodore C64? Yeah, they should have done. They should have got rid of all the business capabilities. I don't think it was a good idea to make a system that was not entirely targeted at the home and gaming use, but at the more professional use. That was Commodore C64 compatible. Why should a business machine be compatible to the most epic gaming machine of the 80s? Seriously? It doesn't have to. So they could have gotten rid of all the backbart compatibility for the business machines, make it compatible with the PET series on basic level, maybe even make it sort of compatible with the PET machines on machine language level. Sort of. Probably much cheaper than making a CP/M machine, which was entirely useless in 1985-86 when this was on the market. And give an upgrade for those old PET machine users. And they actually did design some machines like that, which got very limited release, are totally uninteresting from a gaming point of view, so I don't have any of those. Yeah, but for the home use, which the German Wikipedia article about the 128 is one of the worst Wikipedia articles that I ever read. Most people I know that had a Commodore 128 only used it basically in Commodore 64 mode, used it as a glorified Commodore 64 in a nice desktop case with a separate keyboard, and you could not stand it far away from the unit because this is basically the lines from the keyboard just elongated to have it plugged in at the side. And yes, you plug it in at the side, so yeah, not a lot of space to move. You could not put it on your lap and type on there. You had to sit it right in front of the machine. But some people preferred this keyboard over the Commodore 64 keyboard. And yes, some people did word processing with the machine and did play games. So yeah, there was a limited use for those, but not for double the price. What should they have done is, yeah, make a better Commodore C64. 2 MHz, twice as fast, fine. Better would have been 4 MHz, but upgrade the fucking VIC chip to display something at that at least. Or even better, have it have more colors, have it have more sprites, have it have even a higher resolution. You could get an 80 character mode on a composite monitor with very little colors. Make it as VHS, as video signal. The Commodore C64 did have an S video signal output. The Commodore C64 did have it. I think all Commodore 64s, but the very first released. So yeah, you had already some sort of signal where you could display 80 characters on a monitor with S-video. So why make another chip? And they spent a lot of money for the 80 column mode chip, because it did not work. When they designed it, it did not work. When they presented the 128 the first time, they had spare chips in the back, and when the chip failed, they just replaced it secretly, and it seemed like it worked, but it did not work initially. Production yield was horrible, and And if you get 1 or 2 working chips out of a die, a whole disk of chips, then each single chips costs several $10,000s of dollars. And even if you have your own chip manufacturing, this is horrendously expensive. So the design was flawed initially, and I don't think they ever really fixed it. I don't know about any failing chips, so they fixed that, but never a good chip. Yeah, why not design just a big 3 chip and double it? Have the 4 color mode that you have on the Commodore C64 in the resolution that you have in the high resolution mode, 320 by 200 instead of 160 by 200. Have the 160 by 200 and have it 16 colors or 32 colors. Make more colors, 64 colors, great. Have it have 16 sprites, or sprites with 8 colors, or sprites with 16 colors. And that compatible with the Commodore C64 would have sold much better in the gaming department. The Commodore C64, even though maybe if Commodore did not want to sell it like that, at least in Europe the Commodore 64 was our NES. In America they had the Nintendo Entertainment System, which did not take off in Europe. We had the Commodore 64, the Spectrum, the Amstrad, and to a small degree the 8-bit Atari machines. And in 1985, an upgraded Commodore 64, compatible with the old models, so that you can play all the old games, great. But Commodore didn't do that. Also, 2 video chips cost a lot of money. Extra video memory, more chips, cost a lot of more money. The Z80 for the CPM mode, an extra chip, probably with some support chips. Yeah, you basically had to put 2 different computers, 2 video chips, 2 CPUs, extra memory for the video chip, like the MSX machines did, and memory was expensive back in 1985-86, so yeah. Commodore put 2 computers in one case, and most use you got out of the C64 mode. Yeah, and you could buy this for half the price. Great. So yeah, I would have loved upgraded Commodore C64, more colors, more sprites, higher resolution, a VIC-3 chip. What also would have been great, a stereo SID chip, but yeah, Commodore did not have access to the original developer from the SID chip because he quit. But even if they had put 2 dice of the SID chip in one case, it would have been more expensive than a single SID chip, but 1 chip to put on the board. And that's the point. PCB space is expensive. So the larger the PCB, the more chips on it, the more expensive to manufacture. The Z80 chip was also bought in, not manufactured by Commodore themselves. So yeah, if they manufacture their own quite expensive chips, it's not as bad as if they buy them from a third party. Yeah, that is what they should have done, but they didn't. I have some of those in my collection. I think I have 2 128. They are stored away at my dad's loft. The 128D over there, which I did use quite a bit because it was together with my Amiga 2000. They were standing on my desk next to my PC monitor. So those with a 1084 monitor on top. And I did not use the 80 column mode from the 128. I basically only used the C64 mode. So this was my retro gaming setup at about the year 2000, 2001, 2002, 2003. I have the Amiga 2000 and the 128D on top of each other, and the Commodore monitor on top of that. So quite compact and quite useful setup for Commodore gaming. I could play most of the Amiga games, I could play most of the Commodore C64 games, only one monitor. Nice setup, did not take up very much desktop space. Yeah, and I used that for quite a while. I got the 128D from an old dude from eBay. And with old I mean in his late 70s or even mid 80s. And when I picked it up, yes, I picked it up, I did not have it shipped. I drove to him and he finally got onto a PC. Yes, in his old age he learned to use a PC. And we sat down and played some games on it. I can remember that we played Pit Stop 2 against each other. It was quite a bit of fun. Don't think he is still alive, and if he still is alive, he might be in his 90s, and I hope he's well, but I don't think he is alive. And that's one of the machines I will never sell because of this background story. Was quite a nice experience picking this up and playing with someone in his 70s who actually used this for productivity. He did his word processing and housekeeping with it, and he actually also played games. So not only young people play games, and yeah, for him the extra features were quite useful, but most of the 128 users did not use it for anything but for playing Commodore 64 games, and you did not have an upgrade on that side. And since there were so many chips in it, basically 2 different computers in one, and Commodore marketed it as 3 computers in one because you had the Commodore 64 mode. Yeah, that was what most people wanted, a Commodore 64. A better Commodore 64 would have been nice, but the Commodore 64 was also already great. And yeah, so the 128K mode basically did not get any support from games. Really not anything worth mentioning. On the Spectrum, at least, if you loaded the game from tape, some games loaded it once in to the memory at once, so you had to wait a little bit longer at the beginning, but you didn't have to wait while playing. Some games were more clever, so they loaded the first level, and if you made it to the second level, they loaded the second level afterwards, but did not overwrite the first level, so if you died you could start from the beginning without loading the first level again. Nothing like this happened on the 128. So despite of selling roughly 5 million units, failure. It did not get any support in the gaming department, and you can't tell me that 5 million people bought a 128 for productivity use. Seriously, no. If you really wanted a productivity system, you got a PC. Only advantage, and I have to give them that, you got the quite easily accessible user port, quite easily programmable, which was, I guess, quite handy for controlling machines. So that's probably one use this machine got. But you didn't need Commodore 64 compatibility. If the Commodore 64 was sufficient, you could get a Commodore 64 for half the money. If you needed extra space for that, great. Why have a Commodore 64 mode? Which I guess was quite a hassle, and they did it really well. It is really compatible, but why? In a productivity machine, useless. And as a home machine, yeah, you got the better basic, but in 86, 87, buying a Plus 4 and a Commodore 64 was cheaper than buying a 128. I guess it really was. So if you wanted great basic, you could buy a Plus 4. and buy an extra Commodore 64 for Commodore 64 compatibility, and still got away cheaper than buying a 128. Yeah, you got a little less memory. Yeah. Again, they didn't think. They didn't know what they were targeting the wrong market. At least this time they had a market in mind, which they targeted, but it was the wrong one. 128K in a gaming machine like the Commodore 64 with slightly upgraded graphics, better sound. Even if they did not upgrade the sound sound was great. But yeah, 3 more voices on the SID would have blown away everything else in the audio department. I don't have a stereo SID in any of my machines, but I think I have to look up some SID tunes which use a stereo SID. But I'm thinking they are pretty amazing. More colors on an upgraded C64 would have been awesome. More sprites would have made programming games a lot easier. Sprites with more colors, great. C64 games look quite dull. More colors, great, always great. Yeah, that could have been quite a successful machine, but in its form as it was sold by Commodore, no real upgrades for any gamers. So yeah, it ended up being used in C64 mode for games, and if you really wanted some productivity machine, yeah, you could use it in CPM mode. I haven't heard of any compatibility issues. Yeah, it ran just a little bit slower than other machines, like the 128K Amstrad machines, which were also CPM compatible. They did have this weird 3-inch disk drive, but they ran at twice the speed. And you didn't have to switch the monitor output if you switched the graphics mode. Yeah, you had to manually switch between 40 column and 80 column mode on the Commodore 128. Nothing like this on the Amstrad machines. And I think the Amstrad machines were quite a bit cheaper. So if you really wanted CPM, you could get an Amstrad machine, probably with an external 5¼ inch disk drive, and not be more expensive than a Commodore 128 machine. You did not want to do that when you wanted to play games. The Commodore 64 games are a lot better than the Amstrad games. But if your focus was on productivity, the Amstrad machine would have probably been the better choice. I have to give the 128 that you got 16 colors in 80 color mode. Not only 2 colors as on the Amstrad, but not really useful for productivity. Nice, but not essential. Yeah. Sad that they didn't build a machine that was more useful for gaming. I don't think it would have sold much better than 5 million units is quite impressive, but it would have gotten much more software support. Yeah. So that was my waffling about the Commodore 128 computers and why it was not a success or even a failure. Yeah, software wise it was a failure. Especially if you compare it to the Commodore 64, or even if you compare it to the Amstrad machines. I don't think you got any software on the Commodore 128 that you didn't get on the Amstrad machines. And they sold significantly less. I don't think they sold 5 million Amstrad machines in total. And it did get much more support with the 128K machines. Even today, there are homebrew titles for the 128K machines on the Amstrad, and I think also on the Spectrum, but I think the Spectrum is more focused on the original 48K models, but even the Spectrum gets more support for the later 128K machines. Even the Atari machines They also released the 128K machine, where the only upgrade was the 128K of memory. And I think even they get more support in today's homebrew development than the Commodore 128, and they sold 5 million machines. Yeah, I don't call that a success. This may be controversial, but to me the 128 was a failure. Yeah. Hope you enjoyed this video anyways, and thanks for watching.